Good afternoon, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 55 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Pursuant to the order of reference made Wednesday, February 15th, 2023, the committee is meeting on Bill S-222, an act to amend the Department of Public Works and Government Services Act, Use of Wood. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23rd, 2022. I'd like to remind everyone that screenshots are no longer permitted. We're in session. Few quick things. I think we have lots of old hands, experienced people online with us. Welcome, former retired senator and Mr. Angus. If you need to speak, just to use the raise hand function. And I'll ask anybody online to mute yourself or unmute yourself as necessary. Comments should be addressed through the chair, and we'll use our handy card system. So we'll have 5 minutes. When your time's up, I'll give 30-second warning and the red card for time's up. We're going to start with some opening statements from the sponsors of the bill. We have Richard Cannings, Member of Parliament, the House sponsor, and Honourable Diane Griffin, retired senator, is the Senate sponsor. We're going to take about the first hour to go through with our first panel. Then we'll switch and have Natural Resources and Public Services and Procurement Canada for the second hour. At the end, I need to save a bit of time for a study budget and a quick question on committee travel. So that'll be the business for today. And with that, we'll go first of all, Richard, if you're ready to give your 5-minute opening statement, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's certainly an honor to be here before the Natural Resources Committee, a committee that I spent 6 enjoyable years on previously. And I'm here to talk about Bill S-222. It's clearly a Senate bill, as we've heard, but it's essentially the same as my Bill C-354 of the 42nd Parliament, which passed through the House in 2018. And of course, I'd like to thank my friend Senator Diane Griffin for reviving this bill in the Senate in this Parliament, and to Senator Jim Quinn for carrying the torch after Diane retired. It's such a short bill that I'm just going to read the one clause that's really all there is to the bill. It amends the Department of Public Works and Government Services Act by saying, in developing requirements with respect to the construction, maintenance, and repair of public works, federal real property, and federal immovables, the minister shall consider any potential reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and any other environmental benefits that may allow the use of wood or any other thing, including a material, product, or sustainable resource that achieves such benefits. And that's it. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes explaining why I tabled this bill back in 2017 and persisted through to this day today to get it passed. And first, it speaks specifically to the important role that buildings play in our carbon footprint as a country, as a society, and therefore the important role they must play in our efforts to significantly reduce that footprint. Buildings account for up to 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions, and a significant part of those emissions are tied up in the materials we use to construct them. And wood is an obvious candidate in sequestering carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, storing it for the long term in buildings and other infrastructure. And indeed, the early forms of this bill from previous parliaments, and this goes back to 2009 with the Bloc Québécois bill, were specifically about promoting the use of wood, and that name, the use of wood, remains attached to this bill. But this bill was amended in the 42nd Parliament to broaden its impact by simply asking for an analysis of environmental benefits. Secondly, the government procurement that could flow from this bill would provide support for the forest sector in Canada. I don't need to go into much detail about why the forest sector needs our support, but if we can develop new markets for our forest sector, particularly domestic markets, but also internationally, I think we can maintain and grow our forest industries, creating jobs and wealth across the country. And third, although it's not specifically mentioned in this bill, it's meant to promote engineered wood or mass timber construction. This innovative technology is taking hold in North America, with leading manufacturers being in Canada, both in British Columbia and Quebec. These companies and others like them would greatly benefit from government procurement that would allow them to grow and maintain this leading position in the continental market. Now, there are other models of this bill out there. This is not a new idea. There are several pieces of legislation in provinces, notably in British Columbia and Quebec, and other countries, especially throughout Europe. France offers incentives for meeting embodied carbon and net zero energy targets that has a plan to move from 5% wood buildings to 30% over the next 30 years. Other European countries, including Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, the UK, require or promote full life cycle analysis and embodied carbon reporting. Right now, only about 5% of our buildings use wood as a main structural component. The rest are built with concrete and steel. And this bill would not exclude those sectors. The cement industry wants the government to look at infrastructure projects with the dual lens of a carbon footprint and overall lifetime cost. That's exactly what this bill asks. I'll just close by saying that this bill is about recognizing the big role that buildings have in our greenhouse gas emissions and making sure that we take steps now to lock in emission savings for the future. And with wood playing an important part in these savings, we can create beautiful, safe buildings with a low carbon footprint and support the forest industry across the country. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Richard, for your open comments. We'll move right away to the Honourable Diane Griffin. Senator, if you're ready to go, we'll turn the floor over to you, and when you get it started, I'll start the clock, so you'll have 5 minutes. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair, to speak to this bill. As my colleague noted, the bill is straightforward. It amends the Department of Public Works and Government Services Act to require that when the government is building or refurbishing publicly owned property, that it consider using wood as a material and that the comparative carbon footprint of materials be considered. I've seen firsthand that engineered wood can be used in the construction of buildings because several years ago, our Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture and Forestry traveled to British Columbia, and we visited Brock Commons, which is an 18-story building. It's a student residence at the University of British Columbia. And it's a beautiful structure which demonstrates some of the best qualities of engineered wood buildings. Engineered wood structures sequester carbon. The production of engineered wood beams is less intensive than concrete or steel, and the carbon within the wood is stored for the life of the building. Given that buildings account for such a large percentage of carbon emissions, adopting this technology more widely would help with our greenhouse gas emission targets. Engineered wood structures can be erected quickly. Using a crew of 9 people, the mass timber construction of Brock Commons was completed less than 70 days after the prefabricated components arrived on the site. Also, as already noted, using wood products supports the Canadian forest industry, and a healthy forest industry obviously means more jobs for workers in rural Canada. And a further advantage is that wood is a renewable resource. This is an area in which the federal government can lead the way. As the largest procurer in Canada, the federal government's use of engineered wood in even a handful of projects could begin to turn the tide. As architect Michael Green told this Natural Resources Committee in 2017, quote, "It's really, again, just an emotional shift that has to happen to embrace the science we already know," end of quote. Other countries, including France, Finland, and the Netherlands, have similar legislation in place. And as already noted, in Canada, British Columbia and Quebec have legislation to support the construction of engineered wood buildings. And in 2018, Alberta's Minister of Municipal Affairs announced that Alberta would allow wood building construction for up to 12 stories. And he noted that, quote, not only will this decision support the forestry industry and land developers, it will provide affordability to home buyers, bolster employment, and give Alberta a competitive advantage. End of quote. Engineered wood construction presents a huge opportunity for value-added forest growth for both domestic and international markets due to the amount of untapped potential in the forestry sector. And in closing, I also want to thank New Brunswick Senator, the Honourable James Quinn, for taking over sponsorship of Bill S-222 after my retirement from the Senate. And again, to thank MP Richard Cannings for sponsorship of the bill in the House of Commons. As he noted, he's had a long journey on this one and going back to when it was C-354. As well, thank you to the committee for your consideration of this bill. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your opening comments, and really appreciate you joining us in your retirement. So it's good to have you here. With that, we're going to have time for one round of questions, which are going to be 6 minutes each from each of the parties. And then we'll see where we're at, but that should take us to the end of this first panel. I'd also like to welcome Samir Zuberi on the government side and Teiko Van Popta on the conservative side. Now, I do have Mr. Van Popta as our first questioner, so I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Van Popta. You have 6 minutes.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for welcoming me to the committee. It's an honor to be here. And Senator Griffin, thank you for being with us. Mr. Cannings, it's not every day that we have a fellow member of Parliament from British Columbia here as a witness, so I didn't want to miss the opportunity to meet with you and ask you a couple of questions about an industry that is so important to British Columbia, our forestry industry. Now, you had said that in your speech that you gave in the House, introducing Bill S-222 to Parliament, that this bill is modeled on the Wood First bill in British Columbia. So I'd like to zero in on that a little bit. That might be a good model for us to see what impact Bill S-222 might have on the Canadian economy. So what difference did the Wood First Act of British Columbia have in British Columbia's forestry industry?
Well, the Wood First bill in British Columbia was really meant to, I think in the words of the government at the time, that to create a culture of wood construction in government infrastructure building in British Columbia. And it hasn't forced the government to build with wood, but that bill, like this one and like the Charte du Bois in Quebec, are designed to, put a spotlight, as you say, on wood as a great construction material for modern buildings, especially with mass timber construction. And since the Wood First bill in British Columbia was introduced, there's been many provincial infrastructure builds, including the airport in Smithers. There's a fire hall on Vancouver Island that was built out of wood, engineered wood. And that's what the Wood First bill in British Columbia was meant to do. And this was meant to complement that across the country with federal infrastructure. Yeah.
Good. Thank you for that. So I know that the British Columbia legislation provided the provincial government an opportunity to showcase engineered lumber and timber, right? And so nobody would argue with that. But my question is whether it had a marked or measurable impact on the industry. I'm looking at the Statistics Canada report that said that if I look at the number of hours worked in wood product manufacturing over that almost 15-year period, it's made almost no difference at all. So I wonder if it's, if this is aspirational, but is it actually having a real impact?
Well, What I would say is the Wood First Bill and the Charte de Bois came early on in the uptake of mass timber construction. When those bills were introduced, there were literally only 2 companies producing mass timber products in Canada. There was the Chantier Chibougamau in Quebec and Structure Lam in Penticton. Now there's many more, depending on how you define that. There's Structure Craft in Abbotsford. That's where the member from Abbotsford's brother, I know, is involved with that. There's Kolesnikov Timber in Castlegar. So that is growing. And the reason I first introduced this bill is I wanted to, I talked to those people that were involved in those industries, and they needed some help with government procurement to really get them going. They were leading in North America, but it was such a small part of the market. They wanted that added government procurement to boost them. And, the forest industry has been through such turbulent, tumultuous times. I'd be hesitant to put any stock in numbers of hours spent building this or the number of projects, but the number of projects has gone, for mass timber, has gone from 10 across the country per year in 2010 to about 50 now. So there has been a quintupling of the growth in the last 10 or 12 years. So I think that's a better indication of where this part of the industry is going. And anytime you promote the use of mass timber, you're promoting the use of 2x4s and 2x6s that go into that construction from mills across the country.
Thank you. My next question, 1 minute. Okay, so quick question to the Senator. In your address in the Senate, you highlighted the fact that this legislation could put Canada in a better position with respect to our trade with the United States. And I would note the lack of a free trade softwood lumber treaty with the United States. I wonder what your comments are with respect to this filling in where the Liberal government has failed to secure a softwood lumber treaty.
Well, you're right. Softwood lumber has been quite an issue over the years, as we know. My experience is primarily from the maritime provinces. I'm from Prince Edward Island. So in the maritime provinces, this type of a bill, S222, would really benefit us because we haven't had the same kind of issues in the Maritimes as perhaps the rest of Canada has had with softwood lumber. So I see this as being entirely beneficial in that respect. Excuse me. Thank you for the question.
And we're out of time on that round. I'm going to go now to my second person. I have Mr. Cody Blois for his 6 minutes. So, Mr. Blois, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to echo the comments of my colleague to you, Mr. Cannings, and indeed to Senator Griffin. Thank you so much for this project, for this bill. Senator Griffin, let me also say, of course, you being from the Maritimes, great to see a fellow Maritimer, and thank you for all your work and service on behalf of Canadians, but specifically those in Prince Edward Island as well. Look, I'm supportive of this bill. I really echo, Mr. Cannings, what you had said around the prospect for mass timber and the ability that this piece of legislation and indeed the concept represents. In Atlantic Canada, we are working, I say we, there's a company called Mass Timber Company that is trying to actually echo and build some of these similar plants that exist in British Columbia and Ontario and Quebec. We have the ability to use Atlantic Canadian wood products to help support the northeastern United States and indeed in our own country. So generally supportive of the bill. A few questions that I have is around the use of may allow the use of wood. When I actually read the provision itself, it seems as though those that might not be in the wood sector that are concerned of, we might be giving preferential access to wood products in the building. It seems as though you were very intentional in the language of saying this is really about putting a lens on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions associated with procurement and may use wood products. Was there an issue in the past of why wood products couldn't be used, or is it more about using that language just to promote the industry writ large? Maybe Mr. Cannings, I'll start with you.
Well, in the early versions of this bill that were just basically asked the minister to consider the use of wood in there was no mention of the other products. And so there was concerns around picking winners and losers and, even some perhaps trade implications. If Canada is a wood-producing nation, we would be favoring ourselves in these things. And so it was specifically amended to highlight the greenhouse gas, the greenhouse, carbon footprint aspect of these materials. And it says the use of wood or any other material that may achieve these benefits. And that goes to, when I talk to the people in the cement industry, they say, but, cement is such a long-lasting product, and we've got new ways of incorporating carbon into it. We would be able to compete. And I said, great.
No, and I think about Carbon Cure, for example, a company in Dartmouth that's finding ways to actually put carbon emissions into the concrete itself. So, no, I appreciate the fact that this is promoting the wood products industry, but keeping it open-ended in terms of any product that is going to be focused on the GHG emission reduction. Can I ask, obviously, this is going to help promote and make sure that there is a lens on wood products being used in procurement on the federal side. Have you done, Mr. Cannings, or perhaps you, Senator Griffin, any thoughts around how we might have to amend building codes or federal standards? Because it's one thing if we have a lens on procurement in the country, that's good. But if our building standards don't allow kind of those higher these types of products in the actual standards, is that something we have to look at it above and beyond this bill as well?
Well, yes, and that's been ongoing. The latest Canada Building Code moved up wood buildings are now allowed to be 12 stories high under the new code, and that was entirely the result of the development of mass timber construction. As Senator Griffin noted, Brock Commons is 18 stories, and those buildings are done on a case-by-case basis where you bring in the local fire chief and they special engineer designs and everybody signs off on it. But we have to keep up with those codes. We have to keep up with the education of architects and engineers and construction people to make sure they know that this is available and how to do it.
I also want to ask, in terms of the full life cycle analysis, Mr. Cannings, you mentioned, of course, that's something that the department should be looking into. I'm just wondering, obviously you mentioned you had a prior bill, you're sponsoring this in the House with the help of our Senate colleagues. Has there been conversations with Public Works Canada about their analysis tools and if they have adequate mechanisms right now to make sure that is in place? Have you had any conversations about that? Because obviously the concept is good. Want to make sure if there's work that we have to do on the government side to prepare that we should know about it.
Yeah, and when I first introduced the bill a few years ago, those things were being started. I met with PSBC more recently. They said this fits in perfectly with how we're doing things. They are developing these tools. Some are already there. And again, it fits in with the demands of cement. They said we should be using life cycle analyses, and cement in many cases would do well. So that's what I want to hear.
Look, this passed unanimously in the House. I think we're all on board. I think we support the concept. Last thing, I've got about 30 seconds. Mr. Cannings or Senator Griffin, do you see this as a tool that we should be using more widely, beyond wood, beyond forestry? I'm the chair of the Agriculture Committee, so I think about the idea of trying to procure local foods and have that type of lens. Do you think this is something the Government of Canada should be using even beyond the wood products in general?
Well, I think we have to look at everywhere we can to, the climate crisis is something that we have to do everything we can to alleviate, and part of that is choosing, whether we're citizens or governments, on what we buy or what we build things with, and that's happening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cannings and Senator Griffin.
Thanks. Moving on, we will go to Monsieur Simard, who will have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, John.
Thank you very much, Chair. And welcome, Richard. We started on the Natural Resources Committee together in 2019. And Madam Senator, I'm very pleased to see this bill before us today. As Mr. Canning has mentioned, in 2009, he tabled a bill that was quite similar to the Blux bill. And when it was introduced. I'm the individual who was responsible to try to herd it through. So 2019, 2014, it was more or less modeled on the charter, the Charter for Wood Products in Quebec, which allowed the use of wood. We have to use wood in government buildings in the province, and that was the Charter, Wood Charter in Quebec. I find it extremely interesting as the government is trying to introduce more efforts for green construction, but we didn't have any real examples. Now we do. We have a bill here which will show exactly how this might be applied operationally. So those who are in the forestry sector, of course, are in complete agreement with this measure. The Canadian Council for Wood Industry, for example, a common roadmap, if you will. There's now a policy which will not only reduce carbon footprint, we're going further than that. When we take a look at assigning procurement contracts, we will have an extra criteria to look at here. Wood will always be given a sort of preferential treatment. My colleague just asked a question, why identify one material in particular? Well, engineers will tell you, you will not find a better material, similar material with such a low carbon footprint. Now, we talked about Shikudamu with laminated wood products. This allows the industry to use what would ordinarily be scrap or byproducts of planing and other wood treatment and make new products. And those beams, laminated beams, often are very valued in international trade. So this is an extra incentive, and it's widely welcomed. I have a question for either of our two witnesses, or both. Have you given any thought to something that might be a little bit more constraining, that would perhaps take a look at incentives? When I take a look at this, perhaps it's legal jargon that's the cause of this, but it still seems to be rather pious preaching, apple pie and motherhood and apple pie language. Something that might be a little bit more rigorous so that people would be not obliged, but they would be looking at the use of wood.
I like the way this bill presents things. As you say, engineers will tell you, engineers that know about wood, architects that know about building with wood and engineered wood, they know what a good product it is. They know that it's beautiful, it's safe, it's cost-effective, and it helps the Canadian economy. So what I really wanted to do, and what I think the Charte du Bois and the Wood First bill in British Columbia does, is, point to wood as we should be thinking of wood. Too often, people who are building buildings, they've been building with cement and concrete and steel for so many years. That's all they think about. This would point them in the direction of wood and say, you should consider using wood. It's a great product. It's widely available. And that's the approach I thought would be best, rather than prescriptive use, which, across Canada we have some provinces like Quebec and British Columbia that are very wood-centered, but other provinces are not. So, I think this process is very beneficial and would achieve the same.
Je comprends très bien, Richard, mais
No, I understand you full well, but let me give you a bit of an anecdote here. In June 21, I believe, before the election campaign, somebody came to see me because there was going to be a new build in Shawinigan. But the notion of using wood was completely set aside. this individual is in with these laminated beams, and of course, the builder didn't have any experience or knowledge or familiarity with wood. So anybody responding to an RFP put forward by government hadn't taken the time to explore the possibility of using wood. So I think we should have things that are slightly more prescriptive. It was in that sense that I meant. There was a way perhaps to, and I'm not looking to amend the bill, don't worry, but perhaps some wording that so that people are more encouraged to make a move.
A quick response.
Again, I think that it's always a delicate balance between being prescriptive and, running into legal problems and, as I say, trade issues and things like that. Whereas this, what we really need here is for people to think about wood, and it's a generational type change that we're after, and this is a pretty strong push in that direction.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, we'll go to Mr. Angus for his 6 minutes in this round.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Griffin, for participating. And Mr. Canning, who I know, my colleagues sometimes think he was, they miss him greatly, which I don't know what that says about me being his replacement, that they always talk about how great it was when you were at committee. So I'm going to be super on my game in cross-examining you and questioning you. In the language of the bill, it focuses on the need to consider the GHG emissions of building materials. The Quebec Forestry Industry Council says that 1 cubic meter of wood is about 60 kilos of carbon compared to 252 kilos for steel, 345 kilos for the same volume of concrete. So if this was implemented, it would certainly give a benefit to wood. And I, representing a region heavily dependent on the wood industry, would be very favorable to that. I want to ask you a question. Do we have any sense that the government will do anything beyond just rubber stamping and saying this is a wonderful, great issue, and then just continue to carry on? Have we seen any shift in how procurement is being done to make sure that new wood materials are being considered in building?
Well, I mean, you can perhaps question PSPC very shortly on some of the details with that. But we have, the greening government strategy that, companies must disclose the amount of embodied carbon in building products and work to reduce that. So there is that shift going on within government, and there's also that shift going on within concrete and steel as well. As I said, there's, the cement industry is keen to compete on these terms, and so that's why I was happy to change the language of the bill to broaden it so that we focused on the environmental benefits rather than the actual products we end up using.
Thank you so much for that. Our committee has undertaken or is beginning a study of the impacts of Joe Biden's IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, not the paramilitary group. And they have put aside $100 million for government agencies to, quote, make determinations on selecting materials and products that meet the standards which will reduce greenhouse gas emissions of federal funded building, infrastructure, and construction building. And that the funding will also help identify, quote, low embodied greenhouse gas emission materials and products across the IRA. So that is a huge financial incentive. And one of the reasons that New Democrats have pushed for this study on the IRA is the real possibility that Canada could be left behind in the development of a sustainable economy if the Americans are putting that much financial muscle. So, Mr. Canning, in your work, have you seen, do you think that by us putting this legislation in place, it will help set the table for Canada to be able to compete? And follow up, will we need to be putting aside funding like what the IRA is doing in the United States to incentivize the use of wood products?
Yeah, well, thank you. And the IRA is certainly an issue that a lot of committees, I think, are looking at. We're looking at it on the International Trade Committee as well. And I think it is a serious issue because of the vast amounts of government money that are put out there for all sorts of things, including building materials, as you say. Now, the advantage Canada has with wood, for instance, is that we are the leaders in engineered wood, in mass timber construction in North America. There's Structurlam, the company in Penticton that I mentioned, has a facility in Arkansas, so they have moved south of the border some years ago to expand. But the trees, for the most part, are in Canada that would be used in these products. So we have that advantage. But I think Canada as a whole has to really double down on anything that would create the climate to take on the IRA, whether it's in natural resources or in clean tech products. We have to be very cognizant of that and do much more than we're doing now. The one thing I will mention about, the mass timber products, we can ship them to the United States, export them without tariffs that are under the softwood lumber agreement. It's a manufactured product, so it's not hit by those tariffs. But so there's an opportunity for increased market there.
That's good to know. I just want to end on the fact that it seems that this is a bill that is receiving support from across all party lines, which is quite interesting in this Parliament. We've been getting strong stakeholder supports. I just want to get on the record in terms of safety, because one of the things that I'm always been very careful of in considering are firefighters. I've heard many times from firefighters about going into buildings where they're concerned about the standards, the need to really bring up higher standards to make sure that they are going into fire situations in buildings that are not going to put firefighters at risk. So to put on the record, how safe are these products, and have you had any meetings with the firefighters over this issue?
And I'll say a brief answer. We're at the end of the 6 minutes here.
Well, I would simply say that mass timber engineered wood construction is as safe or safer than concrete and steel based on studies that the NRC has done. So these are very different products than sort of wood stick construction of smaller buildings.
Okay, thank you. Given where we're at with the time, I don't think we have time for another round. So I'd like to thank both Mr. Cannings and Senator Griffin for bringing this bill forward to us. And we are going to be switching panels now. We're going to have to suspend for about 5 minutes because we have a couple of people appearing online, need to do a quick final sound check. But before I do that, because we have a few minutes here, there was a copy of the budget for this particular study, which is happening today and on Friday, that was circulated to the members. The total amount is $5,350. That includes some witness travel, headsets, and working meals that we have for this. And so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to open the floor, and otherwise I'll call the vote in favor of passing this budget for the study at $5,350. Mr. Angus, you have your hand up.
That is a vote.
Okay, well, let's call the vote then. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? That budget's carried. Thank you very much. And with that, again, thank you to our panelists for being here. Senator, have a wonderful retirement, and hope to see you back in the Hill from time to time, unless, of course, you don't want to come back to the Hill. But and enjoy, and thank you so much for joining us today. With that, folks, we're suspended. We'll be back in a few minutes. To call the meeting back to order. We're now back in session, so once again, no photos are allowed until we adjourn. I'd like to welcome our online guests and our one in-person guest. I'll introduce you momentarily. I'd like to, for those who might be appearing for the first time, if you have anything to say, just use the raise hand function, and you'll have to unmute and then mute yourself. And you have the choice of using the language choices of floor, English or French, which should be on your screen at the bottom. And with that, our next panel, we have representatives from Natural Resources Canada and Public Services and Procurement Canada. First of all, online, we have Gregory Smith, Director, Economic Analysis Division with the Canadian Forest Service. So welcome, Mr. Smith. And from Public Services and Procurement Canada online, we have Stéphane Derry, Assistant Deputy Minister, and in person, we have Jean-Roch Tourigny, Acting Director General, Technical Services, Real Property Services. So welcome to all three of you. And with that, we have an opportunity for a 5-minute opening statement. And so I'll go to our Natural Resources representative first, Mr. Smith, if you'd like to take the floor. And I use a card system, so if the camera's on me and you see the yellow card, that means there's 30 seconds left. If you get the red card, it means time's up, but don't stop mid-sentence, finish your thought, and then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. So, Mr. Smith, if you would like to take 5 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good day, committee members. I'm Greg Smith. I'm the Director of the Economic Analysis Division of Natural Resources Canada's Canadian Forest Service. I'm here representing the Trade, Economics and Industry branch at NRCan. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm delivering this speech on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. In this discussion today, I'd like to talk a bit about the linkages between the use of wood in buildings, environmental benefits, and the Canadian forest bioeconomy. Lumber has long been used in residential construction, but the use of mass timber and other engineered wood products is gaining traction in Canada and abroad. These wood buildings are renewable, require less energy to manufacture, and are able to store carbon for the service life of the buildings and even beyond if they are reused. These features speak to the benefits of wood building in terms of low embodied carbon, and therefore to the contributions to Canada's net zero objectives. A life cycle emissions analysis of projects funded by the Government of Quebec showed that the carbon embodied in wood buildings is conservatively 20% less in a functionally equivalent building made with more traditional materials, and in some cases, that figure was 50% or even higher. One of the first tall buildings ever built with mass timber is located at the University of British Columbia and was noted previously by the Honourable former Senator. At 18 stories, the Brock Commons Tallwood House student residence was the tallest wood building in the world at the time of its completion in 2017. The total equivalent carbon dioxide emissions avoided by using wood products instead of other materials in the building was more than 2,400 metric tons, equivalent to removing over 500 cars from the road for a year. Brock Commons demonstrates how the increased use of wood in building materials can help reach the Government of Canada's net zero goals by 2050. The federal government has recognized that in order to manage emissions in the built environment and increase the acceptance of wood products and systems domestically, it's critical to showcase the use of wood in non-traditional applications and to support a skilled labor force. Since 2017, the federal Green Construction Through Wood program, or GC Wood, has showed the innovative use of wood through support of projects like the Brock Commons. In addition, it has supported research and development, technical guidance, and work to support the adoption of tall wood buildings into the National Building Code of Canada. GC Wood has also funded the development and provision of training and education programs and resources and tools for professional design and construction communities. Building with wood is also a priority identified by the Federal, Provincial, and Territorial Canadian Council of Forest Ministers, or the CCFM. Through its 2017 Bioeconomy Framework for Canada, the CCFM identified the need to increase value-added activity in Canada's forest sector. Growing value-added manufacturing is important to enhancing the economic resilience of the forest industry. While I've been talking about forest in terms of their value as a wood product at this point, the 2017 framework recognizes the importance of standing forests to other things that Canadians value. For example, biodiversity and conservation, sequestering carbon, contributing to landscape and community resilience, and human health and cultural well-being. The framework also acknowledges that climate change is putting pressure on wood supply. By managing what is harvested and getting more economic value out of the wood, we do harvest, including through increased use of mass timber and other advanced wood building systems. We help balance the contribution of Canada's forests to sustainable growth with their contributions to nature, climate, and social priorities. In 2022, the CCFM endorsed a renewed forest bioeconomy framework that identifies high priority challenges to bioeconomy growth that are relevant across the country. The renewed framework includes actions for jurisdictions to take to help address these challenges. Most relevant to us today is the challenge related to a lack of support for demonstration and scaled-up financing, which are required, to prove and commercialize innovative products and technologies, including wood-building systems. To address this challenge, the renewed framework identifies procurement of bioproducts by all orders of government as a responsive action. In closing, there are significant environmental benefits to building with mass timber and other wood systems, including reducing embodied carbon emissions. Canada is well placed to access these benefits in the future, given our innovative forest sector. I thank you all for having me to speak about this issue and wish you all a good day.
Okay. Great, thank you for those opening comments. And we'll now go to our Public Services and Procurement Canada representatives. And I believe, although I could be wrong, Mr. Derry, if you'll be giving the opening statement, is that correct?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Merci et bonjour. Monsieur le Président, j'ai le plaisir de comparaître devant le comité à titre de...
I have the pleasure to appear before the committee in my capacity as the ADM of Public Services Procurement Canada. I'm here to discuss the role my organization could play with respect to Bill S-222, an act to amend the Public Works and Government Services Act as regards use of wood.
That the land on which our head office is located is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. PSPC managed one of the largest and most diverse portfolio of real estate in the country and is the Government of Canada real estate expert. PSPC provides safe, healthy, and productive working environment for over 260,000 federal employees across Canada, including accommodation for parliamentarian and a full range of real property services, including the provision of architectural and engineering services. The spirit and intent of this proposed legislation aligns with the government's goal of supporting Canadian industry to further develop sustainable material solutions, including wood product, in the pursuit of reducing greenhouse gas emission of the built environment. I would like to highlight the important work undertaken by PSPC in that regard. The 2020 Greening Government Strategy required the government to reduce the environmental impact of structural construction material by disclosing the amount of embodied carbon in the structural materials for major construction project. There is also a requirement to reduce the embodied carbon of structural material of major construction projects by 30% starting in 2025. Implementing tools to support these requirements within PSPC will be a key focus in coming years. Public Services and Procurement Canada consider the entire context of a project before starting new construction or rehabilitation project by analyzing each project on a holistic basis. This approach ensures a balanced review of all of the various requirements while respecting our commitment to Indigenous collaboration, reducing costs, using sustainable material, and meeting our greening and net zero carbon commitment. La dernière lettre de mandat de la ministre des Services publics et Approvisionnement Canada stipule que...
The most recent mandate letter of the Minister of Public Service and Procurement Canada requires that PSPC work with Infrastructure Canada and RNNR Natural Resources Canada to put a new Buy Clean strategy in place to support and prioritize the use of made-in-Canada low-carbon products in Canadian infrastructure projects. Through its experience in sustainability as a supplier of procurement, architecture, and engineering services, as well as real property assets, PSPC is especially well positioned to have a direct and significant impact on the greening of government operations. PSPC is actively participating in a number of initiatives that support the use of low-carbon materials in construction projects. And here are a few examples. In cooperation with the NR Council of Canada, produce a set of Canadian data on low-carbon building materials in order to enable informed decisions making through the life cycle assessment initiative and the incorporation of low-carb requirements in construction and infrastructure projects in Canada. The Canadian National Master Construction Specification was updated in 2021 to include new details on encapsulated mass timber construction. We're also cooperating with the Centre for Greening Government at Treasury Board Secretariat to support the implementation of reduced embodied carbon in structural materials by developing mandatory requirements and carrying out pilot projects. Discussions are underway with the concrete, steel, and wood industries in order to establish reduction targets.
Always mindful of the material we source for our infrastructure project and continue to encourage green innovation. In conclusion, Public Service and Procurement Canada will continue to lead the way in embedding environmental consideration into its requirement with respect to the construction, modernization, maintenance, and repair of the federal real property. Nos pratiques ASPAC permettent l'utilisation de bois d'œuvre.
At PSPC, we're always mindful of the materials we source for infrastructure projects, and we continue to encourage green innovation. This includes, but not limited to, current rehab, and it's with pleasure that we will answer your questions.
We have a first round of 6 minutes each, and first up I have Mr. Patzer. So when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to all of our witnesses for coming. Definitely appreciate what you all had to say. I'm going to start with public services and procurement, and I'm just wondering if you guys are, if the department is capable of making the right decision to build with wood products.
Thank you for the question. I would say that the PSPC as a department and as an expert in real property required a review of each project, and each project is looked at on this benefit of which materials should be used in its construction. So it's not a decision that it's taking across the board. It's decisions that are taking on a project-by-project basis to ensure that we are using the most efficient material, the most secure material, and the material that has the less empreinte carbone or the carbon footprint.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just considering this movement towards building with wood products, has your department recommended a flexible approach to these projects?
Flexible approach, like I said, we are looking at each project on its own merit and looking at, with our expertise and the expertise of hired expertise also, what is the best solution for each project. As an example, since the Canadian Building Code 2020 has been changed to allow for 12-story building construction in mass timber, we are looking at a project here in the National Capital Region on the possibility of erecting a 12-story building with mass timber.
How will your department measure the environmental impact of using wood products? There were some numbers kind of thrown about in the opening remarks, but I'm just curious how you guys are going to measure the actual impact that it's going to have by using wood products.
I would turn to my colleague Jean Roch, who's the expert in the domain for calculating GHG emission.
Merci tout le monde. Thank you very much. It's my first time in front of a committee, and I really enjoy the experience, what I see. The measure is going to rely on the embodied carbon procedure established by TBS in cooperation with National Research Council. We're going to integrate that into our project process to identify what's going to be the target, what's going to be proposed in the design, and then we're going to measure the performance at the end compared to what was identified in the design. As was said, we're talking about 30% reduction in greenhouse gases and embodied carbon by 2025. So we already started applying the standard that's been issued in December by Treasury Board Secretariat.
Okay.
So, but this standard is pretty new. We're still in the implementation of it.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good to hear. Will it only be considered before the project begins, or is this going to be a ongoing process as we look at the entirety of the project from the time it begins to maybe the time that the building is finished? Or I would assume there'd have to be a stamp of approval before things will begin, though. But is it going to be through the entirety, or is it only at the beginning of the process?
It's going to be for the embodied carbon in the structural material, let's say structural wood, is going to be identified at the beginning of the design. Because really this is where you make the decision. Once this is established, if other opportunity would come, I suppose we'll look into it. But it's important that we really identifying at the design period of the project before we start constructing.
Okay, and then are you comparing the life cycle emissions between different products, whether it be wood, steel, concrete, otherwise, and other technologies as well, or is it like just kind of trying to get a glimpse at the entire process here?
Yeah. We're going to compare various material, that's for sure, various structural material. The procedure to do that is going to be defined by Treasury Board Secretariat in cooperation with National Research Council. We are applying the rules that have been identified by those bodies.
Okay. Right on. Thank you. To either department, have either of you identified a potential impact of this bill on our softwood lumber dispute with the U.S.? I'm just wondering if there would be any potential ramifications from that or from the lack thereof.
Thank you. I can take that question. What I would say is that in order to get a better sense of the potential impacts, you would need to speak to a representative from Global Affairs Canada, and all likelihood is this is a matter that's typically dealt with by their department.
Okay. And I guess my last question is going to be, is it possible for there to be a negative environmental impact if more trees are harvested due to the higher demand of wood products? I understand obviously by building it you're going to store it long term, but by eliminating trees from the forest, I'm just wondering if there's any negative impacts we might be overlooking here.
Thank you for that. So provincial and territorial governments are responsible for forest management, and they specify an annual allowable cut from public lands. Regulating harvest levels in this way helps to ensure the sustainability over the long term, and regardless of the changes in demand for wood. So the short answer would be no to your question. Timber harvesting is sustainable in Canada due to strong laws, oversight and management, and the requirement for all harvested public lands to be regenerated. According to the National Forestry Database in 2020, the sustainable wood supply in Canada was calculated at 215 million cubic meters, of which 143.1 million cubic meters was harvested. So that's 66.5%. So in general, I'd say no.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're out of time on that one, so thank you. We will now go to, it's been a while since I've had to use this clock. We'll now go to Francesco, who will have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Obviously, this bill is well known to everyone, and I'm able to take a look at when the bill S222 actually appeared before the Senate committee and the testimony that was offered or provided there to the honorable senators. And now here we're going through this on the House, and it doesn't seem to be too much disagreement in terms of moving forward with using more mass timber in our country. We are blessed with the resource, and we're blessed with the know-how to do it. And frankly, some of the Scandinavian countries and Austria as well have used mass timber for many years, and I know there's a lot of assistance in terms of looking at how they've been using it for the period of time they have. My first question is with regards to the number of buildings or projects that are being constructed or being done. If there's an update on the uptake in terms of using mass timber from the officials, if someone can comment on that, please.
Mr. President,
please.
I would suggest is my colleague, we don't have statistic from industry-wide on how there's been an increase in mass timber building being built. I don't know if my colleague from NRCan would have the statistic.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry about that.
No, if you can give just a couple of examples of where it is being utilized, that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do so, Stefan, if you'd like.
Go ahead. And I have an example I could use if definitely also. So go ahead and I'll complete the answer after you.
Thank you very much. So I'll just draw from Natural Resources Canada's State of Mass Timber in Canada report. In looking at commercial, industrial, and residential projects across Canada, the database indicates there are just under 300 projects that have been completed to date, and this would be across Canada, and so including in various provinces and territories.
Please, sir, go ahead and finish.
So, and I could add to that as an example, the Manège Militaire Voltigeur de Québec. And as an example, this is one of the projects. We look at all of our project, and when mass timber is what resonate that would be the best solution, that's what we're using. The Voltigeur is all constructed with wood mass timber. And it is also for its acoustic. There's event in that building. It's a building that burned down in 2009, I believe, that we completely rebuilt from the ground up, and it's all using mass timber. As an example, I spoke about earlier about the 100s Park, where mass timber is being considered now for a 12-story building right downtown Ottawa, as an example.
Thank you, sir. To both gentlemen for that answer. The thing I do wish to put on record is that in the province of Ontario and up in York Region, in one of the ridings I represent in the heart of my riding, the folks that are building these mass timber projects are being trained at the Local 27, the Carpenters Union Training Center in the city of Vaughan. When you walk in there and you go for a tour, I know the Prime Minister was with me less than 2 weeks ago at the training center. You will see mass timber there. You'll see the trainees learning how to put it together, how to make sure it's safe, that it's load-bearing and everything we want it to be when it's being utilized. And, those skilled trades that work hard every day to build our communities in this country, obviously we all applaud them, and they are being trained to utilize mass timber as well. My last question would be for this round is having Bill S22, is it going to overcome sort of barriers on the federal government side in selecting wood as a building material? Because I think with the innovation that's going on with regards to mass timber and the environmental benefits, and Canada being blessed with the actual resource, much like the Scandinavian countries are, will also lead that. But how can you, if you can, the officials can comment on how Bill S22 will help us move in that direction expeditiously? Thank you. If I can go to the NRCan official first, that'd be great.
Thank you. I think I would just quickly note that public procurement has been used in various other countries to promote the use of mass timber in wood building, and that this bill has the potential to prioritize embodied carbon considerations in building products, and that to the degree that wood products are preferable in some instances, that could be very beneficial. Just to come back, and I apologize if I'm not allowed to do this, but to your previous question, I'm now being told by officials that in actuality there are over 760 mass timber projects across Canada because I was not counting things like bridges and institutional buildings. So my apologies for coming back there, but I figured it was worth clarifying. But I will pass on to my colleague from PSBC.
Thank you for that clarification. So I have a minute left, 30 seconds. My final comment is it's obviously great to see that the federal government's moving in this direction. I just want to say thank you to the folks that drove the bus on this bill, S222, and Senator Diane Griffin, and to you, MP, and to MP Canning's not here, but just to say a big thank you, because I think our wood sector in Canada is going through a renaissance, and this is part of the renaissance that we want to see for both the economy and the environment. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. We'll now move to Monsieur Simard, who will have his 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Denny, you gave us an example which made me surprised somewhat. You talked of the Voltigeurs military barracks in Quebec, and we wanted to, of course, look at the wood, massive timber, to keep the historical value of the building, the traditional aspects. I know that in a not so distant past, the Arc building in Shawinigan, wood was completely ignored as a possibility. You spoke of the minister's mandate letter. Now, apart from the project that you just gave an example of, what other concrete measures are being taken to look at wood solutions in the projects that are currently on offer? Thank you, Chair. As I said earlier, we examine each project on its merits. At Shawinigan, the CRA building, it's a pilot project, in fact, to see carbon reduction. It's mostly cement. They're using cement which has embedded carbon. So we're looking at each project that's either currently underway or soon to be, and we are trying to develop the best solution for the specific project. I think any modifications to the Canada Building Code in 2020 will help us to promote the use of timber building, the use of wood. Right now, the regulations say 12 stories for... No, it's okay. That's fine. Perhaps to enlighten us a little bit more on the type of analysis that you're conducting, I suppose that you have a criteria matrix of sorts, and one of the criteria would be the lowest cost offer. Usually it's a criteria, and the major problem is that with use of wood projects, it's a little bit more costly because it's not part of the traditional methods of the industry. Don't you think it would be important to try to harmonize the lowest bid and perhaps those that are not quite the lowest, but with more environmental benefits? Well, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. I think that PSPC is in fact a leader in, I'll say it in English.
Word shadow price of carbon. Quand l'industrie calculait
the shadow price of carbon, when we were trying to develop it at $50, for example, we started to calculate it at $300 a ton for a project which would extend over a 40-year life cycle. And that will make an enormous difference in our calculation when we look at a project that's based on mass timber, because the initial cost may be a little high, but over the length of the whole project, 40 years for the average building, if you will, there should, in fact, tend to go not for the lowest price, but the lowest price for the best results environmentally. Thank you, Mr. Day. Mr. Smith, I was listening to you earlier in your presentation, and you spoke of bioeconomy, the bioeconomy in Canada, 2017, and you came back at the end of your presentation to indicate that in 2020, a new framework for forest bioeconomy had been approved. You said that the greatest challenge we face today is that for lack of support for demonstration projects and the financing for scaling up projects and to commercialize innovative technological products. Well, that's music to my ears, because that is what the entire forest industry has been trying to get across for years now. And I don't mean to be abrasive, but there's a serious difference with what you're proposing and the government's actions. I don't see if there's been any activity between 2017 and 2020. But in 2022, forest industry people are telling me that it's still undercapitalized, still under-resourced, and they're the poor cousins of the construction industry. Now, how can we narrow the gap, if you wish, and get ahead with the bioeconomy?
The question. The renewed bioeconomy framework that was released and approved by the CCFM last year offers a number of different actions that can be taken to support the bioeconomy. One of which is looking at ways to promote innovation and support innovative wood product use and demand creation within Canada. But as ways to promote the industry and to support the forest industry, there have been a number of products delivered from Natural Resources Canada, since 2017 that aim to promote innovation and to promote the use of wood and demonstration projects as well. So I can speak about a few in particular, this Green Construction Through Wood program has a number of activities, including funding demonstration projects, wood education to building codes, and is expected to lead to between 0.6 and 1 megaton decrease in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. This program has provided over $2 million in support of developing and building the future capacity for wood design at Canadian engineering and architectural schools across Canada, and this has led to the addition of courses on wood design and construction and curricula at accredited engineering, architectural, and construction management programs in Canada as well. So that's just how it's building kind of the baseline of what is needed to promote building with wood in Canada as well.
Sorry, I'm going to have to jump in. We are at the end of our time here. So if there's a concluding sentence, I'll give you that, but otherwise we will need to move on.
There have also been tens of millions of dollars to demonstration projects across Canada that are promoting mass timber use. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to Mr. Angus for his 6 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. This bill is something that I think is really important. The question is whether or not it will be taken up and made real, because we know that 25% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions come from the construction sector, residential, commercial projects. The World Building Council has called for a 40% reduction in GHG emissions in construction by 2030. So to Natural Resources Canada, has there been any analysis of where we stand? Have we seen any drop at all in GHG emissions? Because we've been focused at our committee very much on the oil and gas sector, but given the 40% call to reduce in construction, where are we at on that?
Thanks very much for the question. So the information that I can provide today is that the program that I spoke of, GC Wood, that was promoting building with wood across Canada, supported a number of activities, demonstration projects, wood education, as I previously mentioned as well, and revisions to building codes. And it's expected that would lead to about a 0.6 to 1 megaton-ish decrease in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And this is both stored emissions and avoided and mitigated emissions. Now, this is just about one program of the types of programs that were being delivered to transform the forest sector since 2017, but it's the one that has the closest relation to the discussion today.
Yeah, I guess my concern is it's sort of education about wood products. To me, is something that's very motherhood, and we could be doing that at any time. But if we're looking at trying to get a 40% reduction by 2030, there doesn't seem to be much fire in the belly there. So I note that the 2017 budget gave $39.8 million over 4 years to promote wood projects. Was all that money spent, and would you be able to send us a list of where what projects got funded?
Yes, we would be able to do that.
Thank you. Because in the previous round of questioning, I asked about the Inflation Reduction Act, where Biden has put a major drive on wood investment to the tune of $100 million. So has Natural Resources Canada looked at the impact that the IRA could have in terms of our competitiveness if Biden is putting such massive investments in mass timber products? Where will that leave Canada? Have you done any analysis on that?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the IRA has been studied quite heavily from various aspects at Natural Resources Canada. However, I would say at this time, we're still studying where these programs are being delivered, how they're being delivered, and their nature, and that would have to inform at that point what the potential impact could be. So I would say there's still some clarity to be determined based on how these are implemented.
Okay, thank you for that. We know that in terms of sustainable building, mass timber projects, building with much reduced GHG impacts, the Europeans are way ahead of us. This is a very serious issue for them, as well as having a very serious housing programs at their state levels and at their municipal levels. And in Canada, we got Doug Ford paving over the Greenbelt to build monster homes. So I want to get back to the question about this 40% reduction. Do we have to legislate something in order to make this happen? Because we have building codes, we have federal building codes, we have issues that are being built at the provincial level. This legislation, I'd like to think, is one part of it, but how are we credibly going to get to this 40% reduction and show that we can actually compete when the Europeans and other jurisdictions have really put the investments on the table? For example, the $100 million that Biden is doing. What are we looking at from NRCan's point of view in terms of promoting wood and making this a reality?
Thank you again for the question. So I think it's important to note that the 40% decrease here would be from both operational emissions, so things like heating, space heating, things like that, but also in the low embodied carbon. So these are both very important aspects to address from the building sector. And Natural Resources Canada is working on on all these areas, I should say, to try to address greenhouse gases from the building sector, including currently developing a green building strategy in order to address heating and electricity, heating emissions from buildings. In addition, as Stefan noted, there's the discussion around buy clean strategy as well that's ongoing, which will also have a focus on embodied carbon. So there are a number of initiatives underway at Natural Resources Canada to address emissions from the building sector. Wood will be a component of those, but will also involve many other things as well.
Thank you for that. My region in Northern Ontario, we've seen a number of mill closures because of the unfair impacts of softwood lumber. We can compete. We have the resources, but some of our mills have just not been able to continue. When I was recently in Berlin, we met with housing authority experts, and they weren't really aware that Canada had mass timber products to sell. They were thinking that they could only get this from the Scandinavians. So I guess my question to NRCan, do we need to be doing a better job to say we can compete, we can sell into these other markets, and it would certainly be an incentive for our mills that have shut down because of the impacts of the unfair softwood lumber deal to actually be able to provide alternate opportunities for investment?
So if somebody would like to take a quick answer, and then we'll be out of time on this round.
I think it would be me. We have been delivering programs since 2017 to promote trade for Canadian wood products, and this will continue to be an important area. And of course, with the mill closures, yes, there's been times of very difficult pricing in recent years, or in their last year, that have caused those as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to look to the members now for direction here. We're at just about 10 after 5:05, 5:07, somewhere in there. We could do a 2.5-minute round each, or if we feel that we've had enough testimony for this part of the meeting, we could move to the next part of the discussion, which is on travel. So I'll leave it to the will of the committee if we want to do an abbreviated round, or if we are good and want to talk about the travel question that I need to get solved by Friday. And a quick round? Okay, so we'll do a quick round of 2.5 minutes each. Charlie, do you want to weigh in on it? The Conservatives have indicated, and I think Mario, an interest in an abbreviated round. How about yourself?
Well, I as much as I love talking and hearing my colleagues talk, I feel we're all pretty much in agreement on this. So I'm ready to move on, but I will go with the will of the committee.
Okay. All right, we'll do it. So on the next round, I have Ted, George, Mario, and Charlie. So Mr. Falk, if you'd like to start with 2.5 minutes.
Okay, Mr. Chair, is Earl going to get a chance, or do I have to share my time with Earl?
You can pass your time, you can share your time, but this will be the last chance.
Okay.
For 2.5 minutes.
Okay, very good. Mr. Smith, you talked about the benefit of trees, and I love timber frame homes and timber construction. I'm a fan of that. But you mentioned one of the benefits is the carbon that's been sequestered in the lumber in the timber that's going to be used. Has your department at all factored in the amount of carbon that will no longer be sequestered because a tree is going to be harvested in your calculations, and what would that be?
Thank you very much. Yes, that is a key consideration in thinking about the kind of the net GHG emissions associated with using wood. As mentioned before, provinces and territories provinces enact sustainable forest management practices which require forest regeneration, and so as a result, the emissions that are, as you say, no longer sequestered actually become sequestered through the circularity of the forest biogenic cycle.
Okay. Thank you. And a quick question for Mr. Tierney. Thank you for coming to committee. I appreciate that. I hope you've had a good experience. When you're going to do your cost benefit on which product to use for building repairs, maintenance, construction, how much weighting are you going to give to the greenhouse gas consideration over cost?
Thank you for the question. That's one of our, or is it Jean-Roch?
If you'd like to take it, go ahead, Monsieur Derry.
Thank you. When I spoke about the rehabilitation of building, and we have a lot of example here, just right here in Ottawa, Lester B. Pearson, Promenade du Portage, the parliamentary precinct that we're renovating, these are all taking into account the GHG reduction of the material we're using in those renovation. So, and that's why we're using a significant amount of wood in all these reconstruction or rehabilitation of these facility. And I mentioned in all of our large project, we use a shadow price of carbon of $300 a ton, which was started in PSPC and is now endorsed by Treasury Board and is applied to all major construction projects. So wood has a lower GHG emission than other material, then wood going to be favored. And I think that analyzing this on a 40-year cycle, the life cycle of the building, makes it a lot more viable to have lower GHG emitting material. It's not necessarily the price of the project, it's really what we want to achieve. And it's a reduction in GHG emission. And as my colleague said, we have done significant progress from our operation. I would see 57% reduction in GHG emission on the baseline of 2005, and now we're addressing the embedded carbon in the construction material.
Okay, and we're out of time on that one. Thank you. We'll go now to Mr. Chahal for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your testimony that's been provided today. I have a few questions on the green construction program that's in place. Would you be able to provide some examples of the type of projects that have been funded? And also, why aren't we seeing a larger uptake from industry?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So in total, the Green Construction Through Wood program delivered $55 million over 5 years, and they're involving 16 large projects, but many other supported activities, because as I mentioned, it also supported educational activities and information sharing. So some examples, there's the Sir Matthew Begbie Elementary School in Vancouver, BC. There are various low-rise buildings that I can name off, but that might get a bit, yeah, I know your time is short, but there's the KF Aerospace Center for Excellence in Kelowna, and many other examples across Canada. Your second question was on why has there not been more uptake. I would say that to date, part of our work has been spreading information about the potential for the use of wood in the construction center and construction sector, and so there may be some impediments just with information in general.
Yeah, I am interested in some of those smaller projects as well to get further uptake within the building industry. I see in my region maybe there's not as much uptake that we would like to see. Is that because maybe architects designing the buildings and folks in the construction industry aren't aware or well equipped to bring this forward in their projects?
I think there's an element of potentially that, and I think that in general it's changing, supporting the change for building codes, which is being done through a number of different projects, the Government of Canada. That takes time to implement, and for that information to become more commonplace within the construction sector. However, if you're considering it being a cost advantage in general, what we've seen through our demonstration projects is that wood projects can be cost competitive with more traditional materials.
Okay, thanks. We're out of time on that one. We'll now go to Monsieur Simard, who will have 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, John.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to say to my friend Ted, who was wondering if it's been taken into consideration the fact that you cut the tree after 55, 60 years, it does liberate gas off carbon. It doesn't actually sequester it. It's being in any case, eventually the bugs will eat it or it'll be burnt as fuel. So, Mr. Smith, I'd like to come back to the question I asked you earlier. In your presentation, you said that the most significant challenge was the lack of support for demonstration projects and the financing of staging for these innovative products. I've had this discussion with NFB Innovation. We need a staging area or lab to try these tests. I see a double standard here when you talk about sequestration of carbon in fossil fuels, for example, and the need that we have in the forestry area for some support. Nothing can achieve the scale that we're trying to get to with innovative projects and even with our demonstration projects. Are there concrete examples and measures that are being taken by the government in order to transform pulp and paper industry, which is undercapitalized? Are there any initiatives on the part of government to respond to what you have stated is the most significant challenge? And I'm not talking about minor gestures here, just real action.
And so I can say that since, I suppose, 2017, there have been a number of programs delivered by Natural Resources Canada, including the Forest Innovation Program and various R&D supports and technology promotion programs delivered through the Canadian Forest Service, with an aim to support industry transformation, including supporting the use of more renewable fuels at pulp and paper plants and other forest sector sites. These programs have been to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars over these years, and so there have been a number of areas specifically that this has been supported.
Okay, thank you. We're out of time there, and now we will go to Mr. Angus for his final 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I will defer and allow us to get to other business. Not that I don't want to hear the excellent witnesses, but I think we are all in agreement that this bill should be returned to the House as quickly as possible.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Angus. And so with that, I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today and for the testimony that you provided to us. It's been very useful. I think that there were a couple of questions about additional information. I would say if you have that and it can be supplied as quickly as possible to our clerk would be appreciated. We are having what should be our final hearings on this on Friday, and then possibly reporting it back to the House after that. So not a lot of time on this one. If we get the information after, we're still happy to circulate it and share it with the committee. But if you are able to share information that you were asked for at your earliest convenience, that would be appreciated. With that, I'm happy to release our witnesses to carry on with your day and an evening. And so again, thanks from the committee for being here. For the members, we have to have our final travel submission in for this next intake, and ours is related to the Inflation Reduction Act, which Mr. Angus has referred to a couple of times during his interventions today, and I think it just shows how important this is going to be, what the Americans are doing to what happens in Canada. And so we did send off a draft proposal that had 4 cities. Mr. Angus had also put in a suggestion of including Detroit. I'm going to turn it over to our clerk to start, and then our analysts who did some seeking of information and guidance over the last week on what's realistic for the 5 days that we have. And so I'll start with our clerk to give us a sense. The point is that 5 locations is probably over-ambitious, 4 is probably quite ambitious, 3 is probably more realistic. And so just, I'll give you the context and then see if there's any one location that you want to take off, or otherwise I can ask for that by writing, in writing by tomorrow, so we can then get the final costing done for our meeting on Friday morning, which then needs to be approved and transmitted to liaison. So I'll turn it over to the clerk to share some of the information that she has gathered.
So I'll just speak to the logistics of the travel. So as the chair mentioned, 5 cities would be a lot. Of course, we'll try and develop a program that works for what the committee wants to see. We did receive recommendations that 2 to 3 cities max would be the ideal for a trip of this length. The second important thing to note would be that the committee can only stay and visit the cities that are listed on the detailed budget. So whatever the committee decides and submits to liaison, that's where they will need to travel.
Okay. We'll go to our analysts for a bit of input as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Chair. Excuse me. I can provide a quick summary of some of the context for the cities that are here. But if the committee has follow-up questions, we're happy to speak to why certain cities are on the list or why some cities might make more sense than others. Briefly, the committee is considering a visit to the United States at a time when Congress is not sitting in Washington. So we were informed by some of our counterparts that the committee might have fewer meetings with your peers in Washington. We were also informed that the committee might get more added value if it were to undertake site visits to, for example, clean energy production sites or sites that are experimenting with carbon capture and storage. Some of the cities that are on this proposal, like Houston and Denver, would include such site visits. I'm happy to answer questions that the committee might have about why these cities are on the list, but those are some of the considerations we had in mind when developing this proposal.
I think that to build on the comment about Washington, D.C., originally we thought we could be there for 2 days, but with Congress not sitting that week, there are some nonprofits and other organizations that could include a stop, but if we wouldn't be meeting with our colleagues is essentially what it comes down to, given the timing that we have with a very limited opportunity this spring. So that's kind of what we're up against. If we can come up with our top 3 right now, then we'll send that to the logistics team for costing. And otherwise, if we reach 5:30, which is in 9 minutes, we'll have to just pick it up by email. So I have Charlie and then Earl on my list.
Thank you. Well, I was hoping to be in Washington, but if they're not sitting, it may be problematic. If it was possible to invite the U.S. IBEW to witness in our hearings, that might help. I think they're very important because they're playing a big role in the whole commitment Biden's made on workers. I want to hear whether workers are buying in or not. But I would say we could go to Houston, Denver, Sacramento, and do the site visits. And if we could maybe get the IBEW just to act as witnesses virtually at our committee hearings, we would. I'm not sure if meeting with NGOs in Washington, we could do that all virtually anyways if we wanted.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Earl and then Mario.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Charlie. There's no sense in going to Washington, especially under those circumstances. Actually, I was going to question that. At any rate, if we could only pick 3 cities, and if we need to speak to nonprofits or whatever, they're all over the country. So if we happen to find somebody in those other cities, I think that would fit into what the initial proposal was. But certainly the concept of site visits, I think, is the most important thing. I mean, there's no sense just going and talking to somebody that you could looking at across a table. So.
Okay, thanks, Earl. Mario.
J'allais dire la même chose.
I was going to say the same thing as my colleagues apropos Washington. I have a question for the analysts. What I was interested in Sacramento was the possibility of having a closer look at the agreement for the carbon credit market between California and Quebec. So I don't know if we'll have any possibility of doing that. Were we to get there? Well, thanks for the question. I think the initiative is the Western Climate Initiative. And if the committee would like to meet with the Californian authorities on that matter, I think we can identify some favorable people that we could talk to on that. Yes, that would be very good.
In Northern California, site visit that was also deemed to be of interest. So we could see about doing that if we're narrowing it down to 3 locations. So what I'm hearing is we'll take Washington off the list now. We'll cost out Houston, Denver, Sacramento, and then that we'll bring forward for the final costed budget for comment and perhaps approval on Friday, so we can transmit it by the deadline to liaison. Okay. All right, good. That's all I have for today. So thanks, everybody. On Friday, we'll continue with S222. We have one panel with one witness from each of the parties. I think everybody got their first choice except for the Bloc, who theirs wasn't available, so we have their second choice coming, but 4 panelists. The second hour is reserved for the clause by clause, and in this case, I think there's 1 clause, so it'll be the clause review. And then we'll do the budget discussion, and that'll be the end of our time together this week. So thanks, everybody, and with that, meeting's adjourned.
you.